Hello, everybody. Good morning. You are either watching and or listening to Outlier TV. I'm your host, Georgie Speakman, and we have the very talented and humble Josh Levine, the one and only Josh Levine in the studio today.
I'm the only Josh Levine in the studio today.
You came all the way from the west side.
That's right.
You made it in one piece.
It's a trek.
It is a trek through this traffic this time of day, but you're here.
For you, it's worth it.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So for those who are less familiar with Josh, he is, where should we start? Not only known as a really, really dope, talented innovation marketer, but the CEO of Rebel Industries and also the founder, creator of Rebel Radio.
True.
Is that it?
Everything you've said is true.
Pet owner. He owns 50,000 animals.
I do have a lot of animals, or they have me.
They have you.
One way or the other.
One escaped just recently.
Yeah, we got her back.
You did. It's really incredible. Do you want to share the story?
We have a cockatiel who we live in a big loft, 22-foot ceilings.
Unreal.
And so I figured we should not clip his wings because it'd be a shame.
Fly. Does he poo everywhere?
Yeah, he does. But I mean, okay, that's disgusting. But also
in the bed, on the pillows.
But it doesn't smell.
Well,
and so I've
praise the
learned
Lord.
that, like, I think 85% of the disgustingness is the smell. Mm-hmm. And so this, like, it hardens, you get a wet nap, you wipe it up. It's like it never happened.
Sounds like a full-time job if you ask me.
I wasn't expecting to talk about that today. But anyway, so it's amazing. I've never had a bird before. I wasn't really a fan of the idea, but just watching this thing fly around my house.
It's beautiful,
like,
right?
That's something I can't do.
Yeah, right. That's
so
something
it's
you can't
beautiful
do.
to watch. And so the other day he flew straight out the door. And what I've heard is that a lot of people lose their cockatiels that way because they just keep going.
That's how I lost mine.
So he just, he flew up to the third floor and stopped. And then my wife went up there and got him and he waited for her and just sat there and jumped back on her arm.
Oh, little muffin.
Yeah, it was cool.
So the cool thing about Josh is he came up through the ranks in music. You started a music management company in your earlier stages of your career, didn't you?
I did. I started as a music journalist, and but I wanted to be in it with the artists, and so I started a management company. Had some great fun, and then I couldn't take it anymore.
And you wrote for The Source, XXL, Vibe, to name a few.
Yeah. All those, Herb Magazine, folks on the West Coast might remember Herb. A bunch of other magazines that don't exist anymore in this kind of heyday of hip-hop journalism.
Right. There's been a full turnover.
Absolutely.
They can come and go.
Oh, yeah.
So what part couldn't you take anymore?
The management?
Yeah.
Well...
A 24/7 thankless job?
No, that's everything. Everything.
That's life.
Yeah, that's fine. That part's fine. No, I had a great year, a couple great years, and then everything fell apart, and it was nothing I did wrong or my artists, or it was just like this complete lack of control, right? In that, like, we did everything we knew how to do, and it was working, and then all of a sudden it wasn't working anymore, and it was just like, what do I do next? Do we just start over? And I just didn't have it in me to start over. Like I didn't have I guess I wasn't driven enough to be a manager to just start everything over.
So do you look at people like myself and feel sorry for us? Like, you're in the game, good luck.
No, I think management is amazing. I think, artists need the help, and a good manager can make a huge difference in somebody's career. I think, I've heard the argument that, a great manager is worth way more than a standard 20% commission. And most managers are probably worth nothing. And so I think if you do it right, and if you have the right kind of relationship with your clients, it can be brilliant and really meaningful.
Yeah.
It just, but you just have to, first of all, have the belief in your artists that's unflinching, because you're just going to hit so many brick walls one day after the next. And that part, as far as I understand, never gets better, even when you're, even when you're on top, like the walls are just higher.
Correct, yeah.
And so hopefully you're better at climbing them at that point, or you have more resources. But it never gets easier. And so you have to have that belief and that drive and just that willingness to do everything it takes all the time. And I didn't have it for that. I kind of I was in it, I think, for different reasons. And, I was in it because I loved the music and I loved the artists I was working with. And I loved being able to kind of make deals for them and whatever. But when things got really rough, I just wasn't that passionate about it.
Enough.
Yeah.
Are you in a position to share what exactly took place? That was the sort of...
Yeah, it was. Yeah, totally. So, kind of working my way up, I started managing a guy called Bosco, who got signed to Atlantic. We had a great, amazing bidding war, got a ton of money, and then the record never came out. I learned some valuable things that we kind of let ourselves get swept up in this bidding war, and so did the labels, and we ended up in the wrong relationship at the time. So, but through that, I started managing a guy called Dub C, who then became, so he was kind of an underground gangster rapper in LA. But he was, he had grown up with Ice Cube, and then they formed the West Side Connection while I was managing him. And so I got to be part of that. And we had this tremendous success of a, platinum album and a world tour and tons of TV appearances, and we were getting movies, and just all this great stuff was happening for him. And then in that year, so then we put out a solo album, gold record. Everything's going really well. But so then Biggie and Tupac both got killed, what the effect that had on the industry was everyone just stepped away from gangster rap.
Domino effect, yeah.
Absolutely.
The fear. Yeah.
So all the, the radio stations all of a sudden didn't really want us up in the station. The promoters were not booking gangster shows. They couldn't get insurance. The labels were kind of like, I don't know if this is like, maybe we should look elsewhere. So the industry just started kind of moving away from what we had been building.
You're the first person that I've spoken to that sort of touched the music realm that has actually spoken about this side of the industry and the impact around that time that it had.
I think it was a really unique, I don't know that kind of thing has ever happened again, but you had two of the biggest people in the business both get murdered in a short period of time. And,
just sent fear as a rampant,
Well, it's all good when it's on record, and it's good for business, and people are having beef and they're selling, that gets fans excited, and so they're selling records and all of that. But when it becomes, when the streets kind of catch up and it gets real, then a lot of people who are business people first are kind of like, well, what do we need all this for? So all that's happening at the same time. The label we were signed to, London, was part of Polygram, got sold to Universal. They dropped 100+ acts on one day, and so we were among them. Yeah. And so normally you'd have, like, if you had a gold album and you got out of your record deal, that would be a dream come true because you can go anywhere you want. But now all of a sudden, with what was happening with gangster rap, we just didn't really have any options. So for Dub, like, that's what he does for a living. He started over. He went and, figured it out. He signed to Def Jam, and he's built a great career. He still continues to work with Ice Cube to this day. And, but that was his life, right? And so for me, that wasn't my life.
We can hear you, Matt.
So I decided it was time to do something else.
Yeah. It must be really challenging to be able to pull back from there and know what questions to ask yourselves and one another, to be able to pivot and change direction and work out how to address that environment at the time and what that needs to look like for you guys moving forward to continue to have a career and create impact in industry.
Well, I think for me, the thing I learned from my time as a manager is there were certain things I was really good at. Other things, I had no idea what I was doing. And on the whole, I wasn't at a place in my life where I knew how to ask for help. And so I was running into roadblocks for my artists. I was a manager professionally from 23 to 28.
Yeah, so still young.
Absolutely. And I wasn't the type of person it wasn't in me to ask for help, right? I was kind of like...
Pride's very real in your 20s.
Yeah, and I think just that, having that facade of having everything figured out.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so vulnerability was not part of my character at that time. I've gotten better with that over the years.
I know you have.
Yeah, now I ask everyone for help. So if you guys have a suggestion, I'd love to hear it. I'm all about it. But at that time, I was like, nah, I got this, whether I did or not. And, that served me in certain ways, but it cost me in other ways. And so, all these things as a manager that you need to understand. So I was good at shopping record deals. And I got, I had a band that had a rock band that had never performed a show live, and I was able to get them a 6-figure record deal.
Unreal.
Which
well done.
that's unheard of
Yeah.
in rock music, right? Because it's all about the live show.
Yeah.
So I was good at that part of the business. I sort of knew a little bit what to do after we had the deal, but not exactly. And I really knew nothing about touring and all these other elements of what it takes to make a living as an
Well, you
artist.
learn as you go and you learn quick, right? Because you have to be fast on your feet and
Sure.
very adaptive and reactive.
Yeah, but if I had it to do over, or I should say, if I go talk to students and I tell them, the mistakes I've made that they shouldn't, it would have been to go work for somebody first and learn the business and kind of get my hands dirty.
Yeah. Absolutely. Do as much
Let
time as you
someone teach
possibly
me.
can.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you've been an award-winning innovation marketer. What are some of the largest initiatives that you've been proud of that came post the music career? And this was pre you having started Rebel Industries, right?
Yeah. So I was manager first, and then as I said, I was trying to figure out what's next and what, to your point, what could I use that I had learned along the way in the next context, whatever that was. So, Herb Magazine, I had worked there out of college. I'd been an editor. I'd sold ads. We were like a 4-person shop, and had kind of done every part of that business. And I become really close friends with the owner. So I pitched him this idea that he should let me build a street team for the magazine, which at the time, magazines didn't really have street teams. It was kind of those things hadn't really come together yet. So the idea was that I'll build a street team, and then his ad sales folks could sell their advertisers on using the street team.
Sure.
We could do events and kind of guerrilla stuff like that. And so, we shook hands over breakfast, and then all of a sudden we were partners in business together. We started this thing up, and it was pretty easy at the beginning, because we knew the clients and I knew the markets, and we just kind of went and did it. And then, it wasn't for about a year and a half that we learned we had sort of become an agency. And
I love that.
Well, there wasn't
grassroots and just
there just wasn't a language for that at the time, right? And so now every media company has an internal agency, or whether they call it marketing services, or they have all these things. But at the time, we just had never seen it done before. And so we didn't know what to call it. So we started doing that. And then my first corporate client, so we were working for a bunch of record labels, which was going great. And then all of a sudden we got a call from Toyota, who wanted us to help. What they said is they wanted us to help them figure out how to sell cars to young people. And what that meant was we were helping them launch the Scion brand. And so we built the strategy and all of the events and the art and music, streetwear, all of those integrations for that brand.
Yeah.
So that became really exciting, because we had a nationwide network of people who were sort of legitimately in the culture, whether they were DJs or club promoters or streetwear designers or graffiti artists. On the payroll, we were able to put money in those people's pockets and to fund their passions and their culture that they were creating. And so it was extremely gratifying.
And you've done a bunch more. I mean, you could talk to a bunch of the different initiatives that you've done, and we'll get into that in a second. But when you formed, how old is Rebel Industries?
So we're 18 years in total.
So it has been all throughout the sort of Rebel trajectory that you've seen yourself feature in the likes of Forbes and Brand Week and Ad Age and GQ and Wall Street Journal, to name just a few. And and that you've been referenced in a number of industry books.
Yeah.
What is the sweet source of you and what it is that you bring to the table? Because there are so many experiential activation, culture, content-driven agencies that are out there doing great things. But what makes you and Rebel so special?
I think it's two things. I think one is just this curiosity that I'm always
important, right?
I don't know how to do it a different way. Like, I've often been asked as I go meet with some of the big, traditional advertising agencies, they all want to see your process. They want your slide with your methodology for kind of how you do what you do.
Yeah.
And I always, we do have that because I've learned over the years, you got to figure out how to put it in writing. But the truth is, it has to just be the way you live, right? And I think that our work, or people like us who are passionately engaged in what we do, there is no difference between our work and our lives, right? And so for me, if I'm on vacation, I'm still immersing myself in culture. I'm still looking for inspiration and cues that then will inform how I do business. And, and I think that, like, this idea of work-life balance is a well-intentioned mistake.
High five, because I'm like, I can't achieve the balance. It's just like, it is what it is. It's 24/7.
That's right.
And it's all integrated. You can't. It's too much hard mental work to separate.
Yeah.
And to work out what that looks like. And when you cut off one and to merge into the other, it just has to all be healthily integrated in a balanced sort of realm.
I think it's the difference between being an artist and being a quote unquote business person, right? Just working a job, where, I think on the business side, that's just an expression of who they are. And you can't separate those things,
I think it's probably the difference between a 9-to-5er versus just an entrepreneurial human that's always on thinking. And it's not about you can't switch off and that you've got an overactive mind. It's just that the difference between the way an entrepreneur shows up to themselves in life, i.e. yourself, versus somebody that just sees the clocking in, clocking out as sort of a necessary routine, as opposed to their passion or a way of life or thinking. Yeah.
And then the other thing I think is that I've learned that for these relationships to work, right? For brands to want to invest in culture, everybody has to win. There has to be a win for the brand. There has to be a win for the creators of the culture, and there has to be a win for the audience. And, I think so much of what we see out there in these deals, whether they're endorsements or collaborations, whatever, is so very one-sided. That if it's with some big famous, A-list artist, usually that's who's winning because they're getting a huge check, not delivering much value to the brands.
Right.
There's exceptions, but that's usually the case, right? Or if the brands are a little savvy, they get something good out of it, but the audience doesn't necessarily benefit. And I think for it to be sustainable, all three of those groups have to get something out of it.
Well, sustainability is the key, right? Having that vision and foresight for how does this literally stay in the game, whatever it is specifically, but just as opposed to the one-off transaction that just costs a lot of money but doesn't go anywhere.
One-offs for big brands, right? For the Coca-Colas, Microsofts, whatever, Toyotas of the world, one-offs mean nothing, right? And even if you look at the way that they're compensated by the market and that their executives are compensated, right? Having a great one quarter doesn't do much for them if the next quarter
is shitty.
Right. So, and certainly this one-off promotion, for a big company like that, it's really hard to move the needle, right? So I worked with Dr. Pepper for like 6 years, where I kind of brought them into esports. And so we had a partnership with Major League Gaming, where they were at all the events. And, what I learned from that was we were able to make a huge impact on those fans by doing creating really cool experiences for them. And it was great for just the esports community. For Dr. Pepper, it didn't sell any soda. Like they already sell, you know, I don't know their numbers, but they sell like, you know, 100 million cans a month or some crazy number like that, right?
So wild.
Yeah. And so for us to do something in this, you know, relatively niche community that, let's say every single person we talk to, you know, started buying Dr. Pepper, like that still wouldn't make that much of a difference on their total revenue. So it's not about that, right? It's about getting people to care, right?
Yeah, genuine brand advocacy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, so the point is over time, over 5 or 10 years of that, then it starts to matter to a bottom line of a company at that size. But, you know, an extra 100,000 cans sounds like a lot for us, but to a company like that, it means absolutely nothing.
How do you, you know, in terms of establishing the KPIs, how do you get the brand to be really consciously astute and present to understanding what their KPIs need to be in order to move the needle in either culture, not necessarily sales, but the brand love piece?
Yeah. You find people that already get it and you work with
hard?
them. Yeah, I mean, it is. I think our, you know, we find champions within these companies, right? People who, I always say our clients are slightly disgruntled. Like they're not ready to go out and leave and start their own companies, but they want to make change within the companies they work for. And they want to do something with their time and their budgets that's meaningful. So that eliminates a majority of the clients out there from people who are just looking for some good impressions numbers to throw on a report to send to their bosses and no one's ever going to read. Like those aren't the people we work with. So we work with people that you know, in most cases, they're not even, like our clients at Scion were not hip hop fans.
They are now.
They are now. But they weren't at the beginning, right? Our clients at Dr. Pepper were not gamers. But they were people that understood that in order to receive value, you have to create value. And so our main client at Scion used to always say, your job is to help us give back first. Right? And so the KPIs then become a function of how do we do that better, right, over time, and less about traditional, excuse me, you know, how many people did we reach, how many likes did we get,
right, stuff
like that.
That conversation's still been hot though for a minute, especially with all the influencer marketing networks and the push with digital campaigns and all that kind of stuff. But
sure.
Does that really, again, translate to genuine brand love, advocacy, and the sustainability behind the, you know, ongoing engagement with the brand? Right. You know?
No. I mean, in some cases, you know, you see
Depends if there's some kind of call to action, if they're trying to, you know, if it's a one-off, you know, short, sweet call to action driven campaign involving downloads or something. But in terms of what we're talking about,
Right. Yeah, it definitely depends on what you're trying to achieve. I mean, I think in the influencer space, you see the beauty brands where the Instagram girls, you know, do makeup tutorials and then there's a link and they'll see a lift in sales, right? It's very short term, very transactional. It works in that environment. And I don't know when we say something works, like, I don't know what percentage of the time it works or how well it works compared to other things, but you'll hear anecdotes about how like that's effective. But that doesn't mean you can apply that same thinking to every situation. Try that in soda and you get a very different result. Try it in cars and you get an extremely different result.
You're so right. Like the ecosystem of the brand, the environment of the brand, the industry, like it depends. I mean, it all is very, you know, shows up very differently. You can't apply a ABC, XYZ strategy or plan to any of these brands, right?
Even brand to brand, right? Like some brands are so much more entrenched with their audiences, more trusted, more whatever, right? More liked than others. And so, you know, Under Armour can't go in behaving like it's Adidas because they're just in two different places in the market and they have two different kinds of relationships. And so the same strategy is not going to apply.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of culture, because you've touched on it a couple of times, what did culture once mean to you, perhaps through the era of your 20s when you're in music versus what does it mean to you today?
Yeah. I think in many ways it's still the same thing.
Is it?
Yeah,
I mean, it is. Culture's culture, but like, I guess, how has it changed, and how have people, I guess, interpreted or used or leveraged or tried to move within that whole concept of culture?
Are you talking about for me specifically, or
just through your lens and
general?
viewpoint in working with talent, brands, your personal experiences, either having written about hip hop in that era through to who you are and how you're showing up work-wise, and who you are as a person today?
Yeah, I mean, that I think has changed dramatically. That the role of culture is just, it's completely different. When I was coming up, it was a subculture. It was music in general was something that people had to go seek out. So whether you're
the underground vibes were a lot stronger.
Yeah, but even at the mainstream level, right? You still had to go line up at the record store. You still had to, records used to be sold out, right? At the warehouse or the
We've
tower
run out of
or whatever.
CDs, right?
Absolutely. It was just and so you had to dig for it. You had to wait for it. You had to save up for it. You had, all of these.
I'm laughing because I remember this era. I remember these days. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it was a totally different experience of music. And then you'd get your hands on it. You'd get home and you'd read the liner notes. You'd play it over and
like
over.
Unpacking your first Christmas present or an Easter egg.
Oh yeah,
when you're 5.
Yeah. So all that's completely changed, right? And I think we still haven't seen the effects that's having on society and our relationship to those kinds of art. I think, but all art and everything in general is just access. The fundamental change has been access. We have now access to everything that's ever happened in the world, right? Whether it's art and music or just knowledge and information, news, whatever, it's all at our fingertips. So the challenge of marketers, and by that I mean everyone who makes anything, right, is to break through that noise, is to somehow be memorable, be share-worthy, conversation-worthy in this environment where we're just constantly bombarded with new messages.
The noise is real. So how
Absolutely.
do you... Curation is a big word that continues to come up in almost every conversation.
Yeah.
And, the platforms do make a big effort to curate with their playlists and all that kind of stuff in the music space.
Sure.
What does curation mean to you? And do you believe that it's obviously significantly harder these days for brands and businesses and artists to be able to curate their existence and what it is that bring to the table?
Yeah. I'm still old school in that the who the curator is means a lot to me, right? And so I don't really care that much about
So you got to curate the curators.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know the Spotify playlist editors or what they're...
Yeah, like who are these people? This is the other thing, the relevance behind who's making the choice and decisions of what's hot, what's not.
Right.
Why should this track? Are they getting paid off? Does that shit still happen?
So there's that book, Start With Why, right? And he says, until we know why you do what you do, then we don't care about what you do. Some version of that. So I'm like that, right? Like, I don't know who these Spotify people are, and I don't really care what what music they like. So that's not relevant to me. Now, I also recognize that not everybody's like me, and so, I know that those playlists can account for a lot of spins, whatever. But we also see that music in general, especially in that streaming environment, is being used more as background for other things in life as opposed to active listening and engaging with the content, which, I mean, I do that too. I'll be on the phone and have music playing in the background, but I'm conscious that that's a different type of experience than when I go sit down to listen to something.
Yep.
And I put the headphones on, or I, turn it up as loud as I can in my car or whatever. That those are just two different things. So yeah, I think every brand, which includes influencers, which includes anyone trying to build an audience, right? We're all in competition with Apple and Amazon and Google, which is extremely difficult, right? And so, you used to think of competition as the other people that make exactly what I make, And that model, I think, worked for a long time, and it doesn't work anymore because you're competing for attention. And so how we choose to spend our attention determines our experience. It determines what brands we pay attention to, what brands we love, whatever. And it ultimately determines how we spend our money.
Absolutely. Well, the industry and market and everything, the whole world and accessibility has proliferated so much. You've just got to sort of choose and curate, again, your access points for material, whatever that is.
So that's back to consistency. Like brands have to, I had a brand who all of a sudden wanted to be at South by Southwest for an event. And I had to go say, look, these guys had never been to South by Southwest. They didn't know the environment. I said, you have no idea the noise level there, right?
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah, absolutely, right? But so to go produce one event and spend whatever tens of thousands of dollars you're going to on this one night, 4-hour thing is completely a waste, right? Because it's going to be forgotten as soon as it happens.
5 minutes.
Absolutely. So, the question is, who are you trying to build a relationship with, and how are you going to do that over time, right? And so if South by Southwest is the right crowd for you, then we need to be thinking about how do we sustain that engagement throughout the year, right? Because no one's going to an event and then rushing off to the store to buy whatever product they saw sponsoring. That just doesn't happen, right? But that's still the mentality in the world of sponsorship and events, is that like this thing is presented by X car company and then the next day people are at their dealers. Never.
Wouldn't that be nice?
It never happened, right? Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've had clients that wanted to track the zip codes of people who came into dealerships against where the events were held, right? And I said, sure, we can absolutely track that. Let's limit our expectations about how often that's going to happen. But more importantly, if that's what's important to you, then you need to touch those people 10 more times along the way, right?
To really start sinking in and to penetrate there. Yeah.
Absolutely. You have to become a brand that they care about.
Yeah.
There's brands that we have irrational relationships with.
Just like, it's the same thing with human beings.
Yeah.
Same, but different.
Yeah.
We have irrational relationships with humans, and we have beautiful, sustainable, maximum love-based relationships with humans.
You don't have KPIs on your friends, right?
Yes, I do. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. you can. But, if I, most of us, like, if you sat there and tried to empirically break down why you're friends with the friends you have.
Oh, fuck.
It doesn't make any sense, right?
No, it's just a feeling.
It's a feeling,
It's
right?
a feeling, and it's energy.
It's chemistry.
And it's chemistry.
It's all these things.
Yeah.
It's shared experience.
Yeah.
So I'm really close with a few guys that I went to high school with still today. And probably if I met them today, we wouldn't have that much interest in continuing to know each other. We're just in different places in life. But we have these shared experiences over the years that carry us through, right? And so you can apply that same things to brands. And I do. I still buy Adidas and Nike because it's ingrained in me as a young boy that those were the shoes to have, right? And some other brands are just not on my radar, and it wouldn't really even matter what they created or who they collaborated with,
whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever, right? It's just not for me.
So then, is the past really important? Like, at what point? What is the sort of era in one's life that is most influenced when it comes? Because I relate, and the chances of me sort of bothering to look outside for other sneakers or shoes or whatever it is outside of, say, those two brands, which had the most impact on me as well growing up.
Yeah.
How important is therefore the past?
Well, I think that's why there's so much emphasis on youth marketing. Because that's when people have a lot of disposable income. But maybe more importantly, because that's when those relationships are really formed
and are most penetrable.
Absolutely. So, I think that's important, and it continues, and you see that even in luxury with that they're aging down, right? And Louis Vuitton working with Virgil Abloh, like is a way to be relevant to audiences that maybe aren't thinking about them or so I think that's part of it. It's a little different for everybody, right? I mean, there are certain people that see themselves, if you're a golfer, then you probably were not a golfer in your teens. And so you're probably forming new brand relationships later in life for things like that. But that's a much more specific thing. I think for the most part, it's about, it's probably 15 to 25 when you're really forming your kind of those imprints are happening.
Absolutely. This is a question that the likes of a Chris Denson would ask, and I'm going to steal it today just because you're in a similar realm of innovation marketing. But what does innovation mean to you today? That's actually a question that he asked, and I feel terrible for stealing it. But I genuinely want to ask.
You should definitely steal questions.
You're the first person that I've asked. What does innovation mean to you, except for Chris?
For me, it's always about challenging the status quo. It's about a basic assumption that if people have been doing things a certain way, then there's probably a better way. And better might just mean that it's different from the way everyone else has been doing it, right? I always believe play the game you can win. And so, back to the earlier example, if you're Under Armour and you're coming into this world that's with heavily entrenched competitors, there's no way for them to just do what those other guys do better. They don't have more money. They don't have more resources. They don't have those decades of love that people have built up. So what they have to do is redefine the game in a way that they can win. To me, that's what innovation's about.
How do you apply or how do you access the innovative side to yourself as part of your creative ideation process and trying to take your own work and the way you are able to elevate conversations and a brand presence and all that kind of stuff?
I just, I try to catch myself when I feel like I'm falling into patterns of just thinking about things the same way. And so part of that's, I think, just innate that I'm restless. So if I've done something, I think I would have been more successful by certain definitions if I had just repeated the same thing over and over, right? And so, I built one of the first food trucks for a brand. This is for a brand called Camarena Tequila. And this was right when...
Love the food trucks.
Yeah. So this was right when Kogi truck was at its height. Food trucks hadn't really moved outside of LA for the most part yet. So we didn't have the TV show and all the other stuff that's happened now. So, but we built this food truck and it was a great, successful program. It ran for a couple of years. And so, what I could have done is then tried to sell a whole bunch of other food trucks to different brands and kind of just repeat the same thing over and over. And that's actually a good business. I'm not advising against something like that. But for me, it meant like, okay, we've done that. Now what's the next thing? Right? And it's time to go, I don't even think of it necessarily as innovation personally, but I think of like, how do we continue to raise the bar for ourselves, our clients, for everyone around us, right? That, when we had the first photo booth at one of our events, like people thought it was the greatest thing, and now if you don't have a photo booth, there's something wrong with your event, right? Actually, now I think you don't even need a photo booth because everyone's just taking their own photos, and
distributing through their own, just direct to their own socials.
Absolutely. But what you saw in that event space was all of a sudden, every event planner and every client was like, we need a photo booth. And it had become safe for them. And but marketers are always a step behind the audience, right? So the audience decided that they like photo booths and wanted them. And then, it takes 6 months to 18 months for brands to kind of wise up to that. And then all of a sudden they're playing catch up. And, it works for a narrow sliver of the people that get the timing right. But for everyone else, you're too late. And again, even now having a photo booth is like, we don't need that because we're just posting on our own Instagram.
Absolutely. I have so many more questions for you, and I'm wondering how we're doing for time, but I'm going to keep going.
All right. Let's go until they drag us out of here.
Right. So with, I think as far as human beings and creativity and innovation, ideation is concerned, we're so predisposed to just doing and thinking the same thing.
Sure.
And I don't know why. I think that's is this part of just being a human being and just the way that we're... Yes. Or is it just too noisy out there for us to be able to break through and find the space to continue to expand our mindset? You know what I'm saying? Because we get on the rat wheel of just operating.
I think the environment's the environment, right? Like the environment's going to keep changing. I think that we're as human beings, we value safety, security.
Don't we?
We do. And I think security is an illusion.
And that's the scary part. That's where anxiety comes in.
Well, so for some people it does. For my approach, and I practice this with my clients, my employees, whatever, is that if you can just accept that that's the situation, right? If you step onto a football field, you got to know that there's a defender that's coming after you.
Yeah, it just sounds like life.
So you don't go onto a football field valuing security.
No, you do not.
Because somebody's going to hit you really hard.
Right. I used to play field hockey. I used to get fucking clawed out, or balls are flying at your head at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You got to be careful. That shit ain't safe.
Right. So if you go into that expecting a level of security, you're set up for failure, right? So you shouldn't. So welcome it.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm stepping on the field purposefully with a goal in mind, which is to get to that end zone, right? And I understand that part of that is going to be all these defenders that I have to overcome. I think it's the same in life and in marketing, right? That job security, brand loyalty, all these things that we have taken for granted, I think are illusions. And we should just erase them from our vocabularies and get on with it.
This is why all you young kids out there should play sport, as it's very, very good training.
It is good training.
Many philosophies in life.
I didn't, and I wish I did.
Really?
I always say I wish I'd learned to surf because I think surfing is a metaphor, that you can't control the waves. You got to ride.
Yeah,
them,
same. Beautiful.
Right?
Yeah. If you actually look to the environment of nature and just it teaches you these principles or philosophies or ways of
Absolutely. You're not going to control nature, but you should have a plan for it. Right. And so even
carry a first aid kit around in the boot of your car.
Well, like a mundane way of thinking of that is, when we do events for clients, we always have a contingency for rain. Right now, if our events are in LA, there's a good chance that we're not going to need that plan.
But you never know.
But I've also done events in New York in February, right? And you better be ready for a whole bunch of things that might come at you.
Right.
And so, but the point is that the probability of rain is pretty much irrelevant. Because what if it's the one day? Here we had a little bit of drizzle yesterday, not enough to ruin an event 2 days ago, right? But it could have been, right? And there's never rain in LA in September.
Right.
It just doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
But what if it's our one day?
Yeah.
And you're launching a big product and, tens of $millions and people's jobs depend on this thing. And you got to, what are you going to do? Just go, oh, sorry, people that we're letting go,
out.
Right? We got rained out, right? Or do you have a plan in place for the things that might come your way?
Well, it's good to have a little plan or two in your back pocket.
Absolutely.
If you can. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me about Rebel. Why the name Rebel? Why did you start the likes of Rebel Radio? Tell us about that.
the name Rebel came from Rebel music.
You're a rebel,
Bob Marley. I guess I am, and like I said, I've always thought that if something's that we should think beyond the status quo, right? To me, that's what being a rebel is about. But I don't know. There's something about it that just has resonated with me. So when I first started the company, you know, it's a Bob Marley song, Rebel Music, that just kind of stuck with me. Later, when I was starting Rebel Radio, I actually was not going to use that name because I wanted to sort of do something different, but I was researching names. And
it's good to have as a brand extension.
Yeah, but I kind of wanted to not do that.
Why?
Because it's came from a really different place. You know, Rebel Radio is a weekly podcast where I talk to.
Have you got a set day time?
Yeah, no.
Where do you record out of?
We record out of a great studio in Fairfax that a friend of mine lends to me.
Nice.
And sometimes we record on the road, so I have portable gear that I take to Cannes Lions or South by Southwest or fun places like that.
Yeah.
But you know, for me, it was just the need of a reason to spend time with creative people whose work I respect and to kind of dig into it with them. You know, I find that, you know, we just get so locked into these patterns in daily life. And so I spend a lot of time with marketers, and we're talking about KPIs. We're talking about, you know, which is all great.
And in case you don't know what a KPI is, that's obviously a key performance indicator, just in case you come from a different side of the fence.
It means, how do you know that what you're doing is working?
Yeah, and how, you know, what does the ROI look like? And that's return on investment.
That's right. So I just needed a break, right? And a break creatively to be able to, you know, the whole reason I got into this from the beginning, as I said, was to support the work of creative people, of artists. Yeah, so the Rebel Radio it's about entrepreneurs and innovators in youth culture, right? So across sort of any and all industry sector, but just as long as you're... Yeah, I mean, it turns out it's mostly music. Probably about half of our guests, we're on our 4th year. And so about half of our guests have been DJs and musicians, and then a good number of graffiti artists, streetwear designers. Beautiful. Some comedians,
so quite
a couple
sort
chefs.
Of street, urban, culture-ish. Yeah.
And that's just my world that I love, and I Ditto. You know, am inspired by people who, you know, part of it was this. There's all this content out there about how to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, right? And
who would want to be that?
Well, you know, I don't mean that literally.
Really want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg.
But you know, the Tim Ferrisses of the world, Pete Holmes, like I love what those guys do, but they all have this sort of unspoken narrative that like we're gonna take the lessons from these unicorns, these, you know, billionaires who are reshaping the world, and you can kind of have that for yourself. I don't think they're making that promise, but that's sort of like where that comes from. And for me, that's fine. But, you know, I'm inspired by people who are creating great livings for themselves, doing what they love, and impacting the people that, you know, have shared values with them. So for me, you know, that's DJs and graffiti artists and streetwear and those things. So, so I thought, well, let's go take lessons from those people, and, you know, we'll dig into it. And it's not really meant to be instruction. It's more meant to be inspiration. Absolutely. Right? Of course. Definitely. You know, you hear the stories, but, you know, I think you do end up, we do end up uncovering some lessons that maybe the rest of us can use. Absolutely. I mean, I feel I always take away something new in every conversation that I have. Yeah. No matter, who the human is. I mean, you should always learn no matter what, right? Or be open to it. Yeah. I mean, I told myself, I remember as a teenager that I'm going to learn from every person I talk to. Absolutely. And then your ego gets in the way of that. What I've found is that, you know, ego gets in the way of that we, you know, it's tempting to start putting people in the categories and hierarchies, and I'm smarter than you, or I'm older than you, or I'm more successful than you, or or whatever, right? And that as soon as you start doing that, you stop learning.
I agree. I'm too self-deprecating to be in that place.
Well, but I think it's the other side also is dangerous, right? That you
Too much of it, for sure.
Yeah, that when you think that this person's smarter than me or better than me or more talented than me, that creates a different set of challenges to learning from them, right? Because you start to think, well, yeah, that works for you because you're great and amazing. What about me?
That's just that's dangerous and unhealthy. But of course, I think everybody has an imposter syndrome at different stages in their life and career. So it's kind of just the balance of it all.
Yeah.
But you spoke to curiosity earlier and having a curious nature, which you're really lucky if you have a curious nature, because you're always going to stay hungry. You're always going to know and want to ask questions. Doesn't matter who the person is.
It always freaks me out when I talk to people who just are not
open like
curious
that.
About stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get along
right
in life without that.
Right. How can you not be open to so each their own. We're all built differently.
That's right.
So the other thing I wanted to delve into today is your time with Linkin Park. You achieved some amazing things with them, and they're such a prolific group of human beings and talent as artists, as musicians. How did that opportunity come about for you, and what was it like being a part of their universe and ecosystem? Because they're entrepreneurs, obviously, and innovators as well. Were you a part of helping them realize that side to them? Who they are?
So yeah, they have an amazing business. For anyone that doesn't know, they've sold over 70 million records.
Just a couple of records
over about 20 years, and along the way, they've kind of figured out that they're entrepreneurs. And I think on some level, all artists are entrepreneurs, but they don't necessarily realize that.
Correct. They haven't tapped into that.
Absolutely. So these guys kind of figured that out. And so they created a company a few years back that manages them and only them, and looks after all of their business, from touring and marketing and merchandise to their charity work, to brand partnerships. And so they were looking for help, specifically working with brands. That's something they had really never done. At the height of their popularity, they were very rock star, that's not cool, not credible. So they were opposed to it. And then over the years, I think just the world has changed, where it's become, acceptable for artists and brands to work together in ways that it hadn't been. So they were looking for help with that. I was looking to spend more time with creative, talented people. And so I took them on about 2 years ago to head up all their brand partnerships. And we were able to go create relationships with Mercedes-Benz, with State Farm Insurance, with Intel. We had a bunch of other things happening when unfortunately we got cut short. But those guys were great examples of people that, they really had a clear vision in mind for what they were building. They had a view, they're significant investors.
Yes.
In a number of startups.
Remind me the name of the VC fund. Machine Shop.
So Machine Shop Ventures.
Yeah.
And so they're investing in startups, and they're partnering with tech companies and consumer products, and basically people where they feel a camaraderie to the founders, and they believe in them, and they see what those guys are trying to build. Mm-hmm. So it was an amazing experience to work with.
Well, you're able to combine lots of the key elements of the landscape: tech, innovation, music, brand, the whole lot.
Yeah, so for me, that was exciting because it's like putting a puzzle together.
Yeah.
Right? It was taking, these guys are world famous, accomplished, rock band. At the same time, they're not Selena Gomez, where, they're not, they have a great, amazing social following, right? But they're not these young kind of, personalities that brands are flocking to want to just get into their Twitter streams, right? And these guys weren't going to do that anyway. So it was about how do we uncover what this band really means to its audience?
The why.
Yeah, the why and but then how do you translate that for brands, right, and what they need? And so I think, putting those pieces together is a lot of times it's not so straightforward.
Yeah, sure.
Right. How does what a band like Linkin Park has built turn into marketing benefits for a corporation?
Absolutely. Yeah, very interesting one. So, what was the answer?
So the answer was, these are smart, creative, technologically advanced innovators, right? So we put them with Mercedes-Benz, and it wasn't about having them, driving on a mountain road in a car commercial. It was about them working on creative projects with the engineers and designers at Mercedes who are creating products for the future. There's some stuff we're not ready to talk about yet, but there's like real collaborations happening where they can see that the members of Linkin Park are smart creatives who bring a lot to the table and are living completely different lives, right? They're in touch with fans all over the world. If you, right, they're much more plugged into kind of what's happening in culture than a bunch of, amazingly talented designers who sit in the design studio all day long.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a matter of like putting those things together. With State Farm, it was about the guys' charity work, right? And so these are also people who care deeply about certain causes around natural disasters, around environment. And so State Farm was able to kind of supercharge some of those by adding resources and exposure, right? And so we were creating opportunities on tour for fans to kind of get hands-on involved with the band members around these charitable causes.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a integrative little ecosystem that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what a wonderful opportunity, babe.
Yeah,
you would have learned a lot, I imagine, too, through that whole process.
I did.
Sadly, we're coming to an end.
All right.
Even though I've still got a million and one questions, but we're friends, so I can loop
You can ask
back
me
with
anytime.
you anytime.
Absolutely.
What advice would you have for those aspiring to a footpath, even similar career trajectory, similar to yourself? Words of wisdom, insight, knowledge that you would like to impart today?
Never give up.
Love that one.
Yeah.
Can't I give up? Can I quit now?
No. Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be harder than you think it is.
Always.
So
And a lot more work, right? And everything takes a fuck ton longer.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that if I'd known how hard it would be at the beginning, I probably wouldn't have tried. So, I'm thankful that I was naive. But yeah, never give up. Ask for help, right? And whether that's a formal mentorship, whether it's shows like this, whether it's reading everything you can get your hands on, information, inspiration, and probably more even the latter, is extremely important.
Finding the stuff that does something to you on the inside.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you got to find the things that just make you push through walls, and you can't underestimate the power of that.
You've inspired me today to keep on going, Josh.
Nice. You've inspired me. This is awesome.
And I would like to officially invite you to be a mentor.
I'm in.
Yeah. Awesome. High five to that. Cool. So where can people find you, both you personally and also Everything Rebel?
Yeah. I'm at J Levine on everything.
So that's JLEVINE.
True. And Rebel Radio Net is the show on YouTube and Facebook.
Nice.
Yeah.
Where are you? You're going to distribute through Dash soon.
We are.
I'm working on it.
I'm excited for that.
Trust me.